afternoon from Salatiga, from the Faculty of Language and Arts, Universitas Kristen Satyawacana. My name is Francis Sinanu, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. We are very excited that we can have our webinar series 2020, and to officially start this series, let's hear the opening remarks from the head of the English Language Education Program, Universitas Kristen Satyawacana, Ibu Anita Kurniawati.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar series 2020. We thank you, Dr. Michael Page, to share your insights in today's webinar. This webinar is a contribution from us, the English Language Education Program, Faculty of Language and Arts, Universitas Kristen Satyawacana, to all teachers, practitioners, and educators for their professional development during this pandemic era. Despite the fact that we have to stay at home, have online class meetings, and limit our physical contact with others, we believe that we still have responsibilities to keep on developing our professionalism as teachers and educators. Thanks to Zoom and other similar apps that make this borderless meeting possible to happen so that we can reach people not only in Indonesia but also all over the world. We already planned for the next few months, so please wait for further information. We thank you as well to all the future speakers who have agreed to contribute. Last, thanks to all the committee, the English Language Education Program teachers that make this event happen. We hope that you can find many insightful thoughts from our webinar series, particularly from today's session. Happy webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Anita. Ladies and gentlemen, we have more than 1,700 people registered for this session. We're very happy that we didn't expect that many people. Unfortunately, we can only accommodate 500 participants, attendees to this session. We will try to make it available, the recording, if your colleagues ask you questions. But you are here now, so consider you are the lucky 500, which means that you can interact with the speakers and ask questions, and to do so, you can ask your questions in the Q&A button. And if you would like to interact with fellow attendees, your colleagues from other parts of Indonesia and the world, you can chat on the chat room. So I would like to invite our speakers for today. We have two speakers, and they will talk about digitalities in humanities, how language teachers can shape human-centered artificial intelligence. This presentation will highlight the important roles of language teachers in the application of artificial intelligence tools in language learning. I would like to welcome Dr. Michael Page Sigah and Mr. Dian Toar Sumakul, our speakers for today. Michael and Toar, if you can share yourself. Michael is joining us from Finland, where he is a senior lecturer at the University of Eastern Finland. His key areas of research are spoken English, corpus linguistics, and lexical priming. He wrote several books on that area, and his latest book is entitled Spreading Activation, Lexical Priming, and the Semantic We. Early Psycholinguistic Theories, Corpus Linguistics, and Artificial Intelligence Applications in 2018. And he is currently working on the use of binomials in different genres. And Toar Sumakul is my colleague. He's a lecturer and researcher at English Language Education Program, Universitas Kristen Satyawacana. And he's also the co-founder, one of the co-founders and board members of Indonesia Technology Enhanced Language Learning. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Michael Page Sigah and Toar Sumakul.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Can you wave? Can you hear me, Toar? Can you wave?
Yes, I can hear you very well, Michael.
You can hear me, everybody can hear me, so that's brilliant. Okay, I'd like to say thank you all for coming to this, as much as you can say coming when you're physically where you are. Thank you for attending. Before I start, I'll just say a few other words. We will do a Q&A at the end, Tor and me, so where we can dedicate time after we've done our presentation itself. Also, about halfway through, there'll be a few questions for you, just something to test you. It's not a serious test, it's just something that fits in very well with our talk. So, and in order to do that, you can put your answers in the chat function, and we'll check. If we can't give direct answers for everyone, we'll give answers later. Okay, so the use of artificial intelligence in academia and in particular for language teaching. You might have seen this particular report that goes back to 2013 even, Fry and Osborne, The Future of Employment, where they looked at over 700 types of occupations and using a statistical model looked in how far people's jobs are at risk from automation. Now, that's clearly one of those things that is quite important because of course, it could be our job. The good news is if you're a primary school teacher, you're very, very safe, far safer than being a university lecturer, according to that model. But it's not about us, really. It's about our students. And clearly, any kind of education institution is there to prepare students of today for the future they'll come across once they go into the world of work. And we cannot avoid that there is artificial intelligence. Now, Skidelsky and Craig published a book, Work in the Future, which basically talks about this. This is based on a series of lectures that they had 1-2 years ago. The book only came out this year. And amongst other things, Richard Sennett in there said, and I'll just read this out, rather than craftsmanship, particularly hand craftsmanship, being put out of date by any kind of mechanical labor, we have to have a much more sophisticated notion of connecting the bodily work we do to the mental labor we do. It's not connection that is made in most discussions about high tech today. It just assumes replacement, as though you could dismiss the body and therefore dismiss the problems of difficulty or imagination from the world of work. And really, here and in many other of those contributions, one of the key topics is that it is not technology, in this case artificial intelligence, that replaces the human being. It cannot and it should not, but we have to come up with a setting and an understanding how man and machine can work together. One of those things is that if you leave everything to a machine, you not just lose skills, but you come up with nothing really. For example, you know that these days with GPS-based sat-navs, people have no idea where they are going, they're just following what the voice says. That sometimes can lead to dangerous situations. Something similar can be said about artificial intelligence. Okay, and with that, I'd like to start. So let me start with my screen here. So, okay, what this all means by me, Michael Pesiger, and Tor Schumacher. Tor will come in a bit later. I'll just start you all up. So roughly, this is what we want to talk about. There's an introduction, then doing by learning, learning by doing, which you're probably very familiar with, play to learn, how to use some of the tools that are there, which is what Tor will talk about, and then finally we come to our conclusion, what it all means for students, learning, teachers, and teaching. Okay. I'll start with a quote from Peter Noack. You might not be familiar with this fella. He was one of the co-authors on artificial intelligence, a book that landed him a plum job with a small company called Google, now part of Alphabet, of course, and he's head of research at Google. Noack himself is not a linguist, but I'll come back to him and his colleagues later. This is what he said. Languages are complex, random, contingent biological processes that are subject to the whims of evolution and cultural change. What constitutes a language is not an internal ideal form represented by the settings of a small number of parameters, but rather is the contingent outcome of complex processes. Since they are contingent, it seems they can only be analyzed with probabilistic models, since people have to continually understand the uncertain, ambiguous, noisy speech of others. It seems that they must be using something like probabilistic reasoning. And you can already see here a link between what is broadly termed the arts and humanities, which includes us as linguists and language specialists, and a link to artificial intelligence. I like to come back to that later. You also see one of my favorite books here, Life and Fate, by the Russian, or indeed Soviet writer Vasily Grossman. I'm not going to read out something from this book. It's a very big book, but to cut a story short, in that book, one of the main characters is Victor Stumm, who is a nuclear physicist. He and his team are grappling with a really important problem, and their work cannot proceed beyond that. They can do loads of things, and there's loads of interesting discoveries, but they cannot crack this important nut. However, at one point, and you have to think this is within the framework of the Soviet Union under Stalin, very regimented, people were very afraid to speak out, etc., etc., etc. But he has this meeting with somebody who's like-minded, and it's not about politics, it's not about work, nothing. And he gets to reflect about this wonderful freedom that he has, how in a very regimented society where people are afraid to speak out because it might lead straight into prison, torture, at worst death, there is this tiny capsule of freedom, and he's on his way walking home, and suddenly he has a eureka moment, a theory that looks beautiful and seems to be the answer to all the questions that he has with this problem. He goes home, writes down a couple of notes, works it out over the next couple of days, and it's the solution to the problem. And this is quite important, having this kind of distance. And again, I'll come back to that later. Yeah, this is still my introduction. So, the other side, artificial intelligence, or what is known as the fourth industrial revolution. And here is a definition given by Schwab, the guy who's in charge of the World Economic Forum. And if you miss bits on the side, I do, you can move that to the side. So we are still on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution. We're still within the third industrial revolution. The first, of course, was starting with steam and coal and going from handmade things to manufacturing. The second one then brought in greater machinery, etc. The third is basically what we had in the 70s and 80s with automation, which is very much what we see now still. The fourth is then the one that is based on internet technology and, of course, artificial intelligence, machine learning, where men can step back because machines will understand themselves what needs doing. Men doesn't have to program a computer or a robot. The robot will see what man does and can copy it and can improve it. That's the idea behind it. And what Schwab says, I've got on these slides for you to see. Now, really in this talk, my focus is two things. You will have seen that. On the one hand, of course, there is this difficulty that people see with arts and humanities, the area that we are working in. They might like that as background noise. After all, there's music, there's theater, etc. So yes, there's culture, but commercially, nothing. If you are a book publisher, you're not going to get rich, etc. There's very, very few teachers that I know of that are multimillionaires, and I'm sure you can agree with that. We are not really into it for the money. However, linguistics, the study of languages, not just one language as in English, is also one of the key elements to several trillion-dollar industries. That must not be forgotten. On the other hand, if you look at the education, and this is where I can see the link to what I said in one about arts and humanities, quite often it is just seen as input-output. You invest so and so much, you tell students facts A, B, and C, and they tell you facts A, B, C, and D back. But today, what value would be in that? Any kind of device, my phone could be used to do that far, far better than any human being. It can't be just input-output. Also, of course, and this is a clear link to what Peter Noreck said, language and, of course, the thinking of the human mind keeps evolving. It's a biological process. It's not stuck in something that is there, and it's not just using what is there and then recreating things. And this is what we do see a lot with AI. It recreates biases that come, for example, from things like having material that looks at a point of view that is very much similar to the point of view of the people who created the input. One key issue, especially right now, Black Lives Matter, is that you have AI systems, for example, facial recognition, and they are fine with people like me. I look like a proper Caucasian, wear glasses, shouldn't make any difference. However, if my skin is darker, facial recognition systems suddenly say, this is a gorilla. And that's nothing short of outrageous, but it shows how personal biases come in there and how restricted AI can be. Once we have a kind of distance, is my thesis, and we have the ability to not just have facts, but process them, making connections, we have the thing that no machine learning can give. We can create things that weren't there, we can make connections that weren't there. And quite a few of the examples that we are showing today obviously should bring to you why you cannot solely rely on these technologies, whereas at the same time you cannot ignore that they are there. So the final point that I make at the bottom, in order to future-proof the education of our young people, the focus must be to develop, to engage, and to support inquisitiveness and problem-solving skills. It's not just about facts. Of course, Francis, thank you very much. You mentioned that at the start, so that the head of the school, we are now in a situation where our world has really turned upside down. In no time, all teachers had to do all teaching remotely. Okay, big challenge. I think we all rose to that. both us and our students, we had to familiarize ourselves with various online tools, video tools, remote examinations, whatever. As Satya Nadella, chief exec of Microsoft, said not long ago, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation happening in 2 months. So the whole thing about the fourth industrial revolution got a massive push towards as far more digital. However, at the same time, we've seen that the digital divide has become all too obvious. And here in Finland, of course, that is not really much of a problem. It's one of those countries that were at the forefront of mobile technology. People might remember Nokia, and it is a high-income country where people of all age groups and almost all income groups have access to the internet. But even within the EU, if you look at countries like, I have colleagues in Italy, and they have said, I can't just do things online or give people videos to watch instead of a lecture. I'll do a recording, because quite often my students haven't got access to good online connections. Or sometimes, as we've seen in Great Britain, where school teaching had to happen like that, and quite often families are too poor to have an internet connection. They were reliant on public services that are no longer available because everybody is under lockdown. Other things have become very obvious as well. One of these things being that children actually want to go to school, not because they love us teachers, but they want to be with their friends and they want to experience things within a school setting. I personally felt I so much missed my office. I have to come here with special dispensation because until the end of this week, the building is still closed to all of us. Also, of course, parents have realized that teaching is actually not that straightforward and simple. Suddenly they realize that they do quite appreciate what we are doing. What we've seen from that is, of course, both that we are social beings as humans, we want to feel that we are part of a group, and also, of course, that people start to value professionalism, people who know what they are doing, job of teaching. So, okay, so AI is great, but hold your horses, because nothing will ever change that quickly. It has never happened like that in our experience. The only thing that has changed in no time was the appreciation of Black Lives Matter. All polls that said, that was something that happened within less than a month, from not being really convinced to half of the US American population at least saying, yes, we do agree with the aims of that grouping. But otherwise, when it comes to technology, it hasn't, because we have all these things. Great, the telephone was like that, and you have the old mobile phone, massive brick. If you combine a mobile phone with a personal computer, you get a modern day mobile phone. That looks like massive progress in a very short time. But really? If you look at this, the traditional car, this was the first car ever in as they say, 1889, and we know the company still exists because that is a Daimler-Benz, Mercedes-Benz. In fact, you can even see that these two cars even look similar. The design hasn't changed. But all those wonderful science fiction things of flying cars or Star Trek's teletransportation, it's never happened. Yeah, there are flying cars, but they're still just prototypes that make for good showing on TV. Even electric engines, only very recently, and it's a tiny fraction of the market. Hydrogen fuels, forget it. There's very slow evolution. So not all technology moves very, very fast. Okay, so this is all by way of introduction. What have we figured out so far? Now, one thing is that the idea that we can talk to computers and they understand us goes back to the early 1980s, and it's a company that these days is only at the margin in international business machines, IBM. Voice-to-text software, which you then had to train, and eventually, very, very haltingly, the machine would type out what it thought it heard. Apple had that in the Macintosh already in 1984. PCs, the Microsoft things, had to wait until the later 90s to have these. You're now in 2020, and we all can do these things. You can say, hello Siri, and then Siri answers back. Because this, by way of demonstration, is less straightforward, I've got a little demonstration here. Or rather, I thought I had. I'll have to open this separately. So give me one tick. I have both open. Can't see them. Sorry about this. Never mind. I see whether I can do the whole screen share on this one, because there should be both open. Yes, here it is. There is no sound with this, but it's something that you're very familiar with. So just see what happens here. I'm speaking to my phone or to my Google Assistant, and it is a search. I get something. I can get something that is a bit more particular, very straightforward. Doing a completely different search, this is a question that was asked as an essay, and it showed me that Google actually was better than my students in finding these things, which was pretty scary. Okay. Back to this. However, it wasn't just computer geeks who loved playing around that gave us this. Obviously, all these assistants are a form of artificial intelligence, but they came out of the work of these people. So, for starters, there's Michael Quillen. He had his master's in communications and psychology, and he developed back in the 1960s what he called a teachable language comprehender, which is basically what we have now as an assistant, a very, very basic form. In his day, he could only create a theory, and of course, the technology that he envisioned was high-tech then. These days we have something a lot less complicated and far more proficient. What was interesting is that Quillen decided to create a machine, but at the same time he pointed out that while his theory for a working machine should work to program a machine to do that, it is also a theory of language. He pointed out that other language theories would not go anywhere. There were ideas by, what was his name again? Chomsky. And indeed, also in the 1960s, people tried to create a computer that can understand language based on Chomskyan principles, and they got nowhere. Quillen, however, got a long way. Norvig was one of these people who used Quillen's theories back in the 80s when he then did his PhD. Schacht versus Chomsky. Chomsky said that, none of these probabilistic ideas, corpus research, none of these things work. Schacht was somebody who worked on artificial intelligence and natural language processing. And the idea is quite interesting, that Chomsky doesn't have answers for a lot of things, whereas the ideas that Quillen, Schacht, Norvig and others have brought forward could be used as a basis for a computer to understand things. And if a computer can understand things, maybe these things, as Quillen said, work also very well to understand how we acquire language, how we learn language, and how we use it. There are some further people that work with this, and you have Fernando Pereira, who's a computational scientist, strong interest in linguistics. He wrote about Chomsky. Cedric Harris, the guy that is somehow forgotten, he came up with transformational grammar. He also happened to be the supervisor of Chomsky, but Chomsky kept forgetting to say that he promoted one of Harris's 4 columns of what language makes. Harris himself, however, talked about probabilistic linguistics, something Chomsky kept forgetting all the time. Pereira used to be at AT&T Labs. He's now moved to Google. There's also Chris Manning when it comes to natural language processing, and if you want to learn how to do that, you go to Stanford and do it with him. But he has got a background in linguistics. Now he comes up with natural language processing. I'm giving an example of his work later. He is co-author of a paper that just came out and is currently being peer-reviewed on the system that Google has built. Very, very interesting. Check out Chris Manning, I'd say. But the main point is all these people are not just computing specialists or scientists. They all have very strong links to what we are doing. Linguistics, language. So, doing by learning. AI systems cannot do anything unless they have learned it first. The language systems that Siri or Google assistants understand come from a knowledge that is based on repeat learning. Something happens and happens and happens again. What is being talked about is the RNN, or recurrent neural networks, which means that as systems acquire that, that's my third point, machine learning. The old style, the third generation or third industrial revolution is I tell my computer step by step what to do. In the fourth industrial revolution, machine learning means that I'll give the machine tons of information and it learns from the information given. It learns language, it learns how to play Go or chess, it learns how to diagnose cancerous growth, etc., etc., etc. Recurrent neural networks is something that tries to mimic what happens in our brains. So the link is not just with what comes after or what comes before, it also then constantly checks with something that has happened in a prior search or prior process. So it goes back and forth and therefore acquires a kind of knowledge. Told you I'm going to come back to Chris Manning. He is, back in 2002, 18 years ago now, he described a system called probabilistic grammar. He says this is a typical feature of the human language processing because we do not use precise grammar, we use fuzziness. Otherwise, we would find it almost impossible to understand in spoken language, and you know I'm a specialist in spoken English, different accents, dialects, different variations of a language. So in English, if there would be no degree of fuzziness, I would not know if I'm from the south of England what people in the Midlands, in the north, in Liverpool say, because they use a different accent. Yorkshire, different dialect, etc. It's also, of course, I'm on the phone, I have a bad connection, or of course, you know, I'm in a Zoom meeting. And there are bits and pieces missing, or they cannot be heard because there are things that are not typical. There are interruptions, etc. But I still make sense out of them. This is the idea of fussiness. Okay, now if this is true, and we have this inbuilt probability in a system, we have a machine learning language comprehender that works. Not what is the exact answer always, but what would be the most likely word that follows. So, for example, Tor and I are Liverpool fans, club that after 30 years, hopefully now finally should get the title. And of course, Liverpool follows red. It can never be blue, it's not black and white stripes, etc., etc. So these things are very close together. There's a probability that I can talk of he's red, and it means he follows a team that uses a red shirt. Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal are reds. Everton isn't. Enough in football. But if I would talk about, for example, a very typical sentence, and I use any typical sentence that is here. The first signature of model. And that would be really, really difficult because of what model? It's one of those things that sometimes you find students that you have to do a closed test where you have to fill in gaps. Now, the first signature of model, there's no clue of what it could be. This here is the first signature of the French model. And nobody would understand that. However, of course, the next sentence talks about France. The sentence after that talks about French and Europe, etc., etc., etc. So if you would have the whole paragraph, you would understand the word that is needed. There's a probability that it would be something like the French model because what is being talked about. This is how probabilistic grammar works. I hope my little demonstration helps you to understand that. Further, when you use probabilistic grammar models to create technologies machines, and this is something that I've taken from Peter Nowick again, in search engines, 100% of all that plays, obviously Google, but also now Bing, Yahoo, etc., all trained on something that is probabilistic. Speech recognition, also all of the major systems, Siri, Google Go, whether you have these things appearing in things like Facebook or all trained on probabilistic models. Machine translation, top competitors within SEMWA, big conference on machine learning. Yeah. Question answering, this is still under development. I'll come back to that later. WSD, or word sensitive disambiguation. Again, 100% co-reference resolution, really what I've done before. What's the word that is missing? It's French. Co-reference is you look at what is there in the rest of the text. They use statistical systems. Part of speech taking or POS. Most current systems are statistical, so Lancaster has got a great system for that. Parsing, again, probabilistic or statistical systems, all of these. So parsing is how you check language. All that is being done in a probabilistic fashion. This goes back to something that was done by a guy from Bell Labs back in 1948. That was even before my mother was born. Claude Shannon. The Markov chain of words. This is one of those things that Chomsky took up and said, yeah, this is never going to work because if you look at that. The thing is, people don't use Markov chains. Funnily enough, this is not 1948. That was an original proposal. People's probabilistic understanding of language have moved a lot since then. So what we have is, no like here, but it may seem crass and anti-intellectual to consider a financial measure of success. It is worth noting that the intellectual offspring of Shannon's theory creates several $1 trillion of revenue each year, while the offsprings of Chomsky's theory create, well, under $1 billion maybe. It is mainly his books, articles, teaching that is based on that. Not much. Whereas, of course, if you look at what comes from the ideas of Claude Shannon, even further back, Wittgenstein and Alan Turing in the 20s and 30s, this is what we now have for modern communication technology. Okay, further.
And why am I telling you this? Because you need to know.
Exactly. So some of the most groundbreaking and exciting technologies of today are firmly rooted in something that is not a science subject, non-STEM, but the arts and humanities. Applications of non-engineering subject knowledge can lead to a well-paid job. It has nothing to do with a stereotypical teaching route. I did tell you at the start, we have to look at what options do we give as students. If you look at students' feedback, quite often they say, well, you know, now I know about Jane Austen, know about what a noun is and a verb, and I can speak a little bit better English, or write better English. What can I do with it in the world of work? And the answer is, you cannot predict it. Straightforward. Obviously, the most direct route is you taught English and you go on teaching English, and you have a very direct route like that, of course, say in the medical specialisms. You train to be a doctor, you become a medical doctor. But arts and humanities seem to be very broad. You can do a lot of things. And people probably will not necessarily think of working in computational sciences. A lot of people have done that. I had a friend who was a specialist in Norse, old Nordic languages that are not spoken at all. The closest that you have is Icelandic. No direct application for that whatsoever. She then became a computer programmer because, of course, she knew about languages that are pretty outrageous and weird. So theories can be applied successfully, and they can be used to support or demolish existing theories, for example, the theories of language.
And why?
Okay, so a second part, because so far I've given you an impression of how great things are in AI. I kept saying that yes, we as the arts humanities community should still look at what they're doing. So have a quick look at this one, and this one should come with sound.
For you. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for our clients. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have it 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Now I have to switch this.
That was a real call you just heard. The amazing thing is the assistant can actually understand the nuances of.
Okay. So you might have seen this before. Sorry. You might have seen this before. This is Google's system that sounds very, very natural. It has back-channeling this. It is interesting because unlike just your normal assistant where you ask, do this, or what is the answer to this, the person on the right on the phone was a real person. The bubbles, that was Google's machine. The real person is actually changing subject. Oh, this is not possible. And then the machine has to think different time, etc. So it's pretty impressive. Also, you have pauses, etc. And the idea is we'll have nuances of conversation. However, and people have seen this now that this machine is out there, the whole idea of discourse analysis, pragmatics, the implicature, to read between the lines, to understand what somebody means if they are not straightforward. And this is, after all, a service encounter. Service encounters are fairly structured, fairly easy to predict what comes next. So not too difficult for a machine, though it is difficult in itself. But it's not exactly a typical conversation that we have. Now, if I try to have a conversation, something like this might happen. So Siri, because I've got an iPhone, I say, hey Siri, do you want coffee? And Siri says,
I'm pretty satisfied with what I've got.
hey Siri, do you want some snow?
I don't want for much.
She's still satisfied, clearly. Different answer now because I did two in a row. Then I finally did my bit of sarcasm. Donald Trump is really, really great, isn't he? He isn't he? And Siri found something about Donald Trump. And this is where these machines fall down. Thank you, Siri. Bye. Because they cannot see what a human speaker would imply by these things. And that is fairly crucial when it comes to human interaction and human communication. There's loads of other things. There's the hapax legomena, or the rare words. The least rare of the rare words is anything to start with gate. It started with Watergate, Nixon's downfall, and nowadays there's every gate. And I thought, well, you know, what's up to date? Is there an Ivanka? There is an Ivanka gate. Then, of course, the 45 came up with Obama gate, though he cannot describe what the gating is about. It is a rare word because it's something that is created on common knowledge, Watergate, and gate everything. But every time it can be something new. You have language variants, so clearly Indonesian English is quite different from British or Australian or American English. We have minor languages. Yeah, the United Kingdom, of course, is a kingdom of 4 nations. It has variants, but also minor languages. So there's Welsh, the Gaelic form, there's Scots Gaelic, and there's Irish Gaelic. The thing that I've been working on for the past couple of years, the noun groups and grammatical structures, I found that these groups are very, very genre specific, or when it comes to more imaginary text, poetry or prose, they can be used as a style marker. The other thing, of course, is translation, where the key point for many developers of AI tools, it's all about reducing computing costs. Okay, so there'll be almost a break when we go into this time. Learning by doing. a lot of things need to be remodeled, need to be done differently. When I started out to do bibliography, I had to find a massive book, find what titles of articles and books were given on that particular thing, and that was usually about 30 to 40 years behind. These days I can look at Arvik's preprints. I have things at my fingertips that are not even in print, probably will never be printed, not even on the screen, prior peer review, etc. There's a clear change, we have to adapt. So, going back to all the other things, is it really of any relevance that we ask students to cram their heads with knowledge just so that we ask them to talk back to us and give us this knowledge back? Here they have to have this knowledge, but is it really that important that that is our key point of what we are testing? No, we have to find knowledge as a point where it can be used for problem solution modeling, problem solving. So, quite often, if you ask, people cram their heads for an exam, they knew everything on the day of the exam, have forgotten everything after the exam. I'm no exception, especially when it comes to things like names or dates, titles. I knew them for the day, I've forgotten them the second after. Okay, but knowledge, is that something that if you go out and want to get a job can be seen as a USP, a unique selling point? No. We have to have different kinds of learning skills. So a book exam, which is just read a book, answer things of what is in the book, that's just not enough, because these days that is not a skill that anybody would acquire anymore. Okay. So pattern recognition, creative connections, that's far more important. The ability to not just learn, but to relearn, to discard of old knowledge, move on to new knowledge, very important. So there's something for you, and can you please give answers in the chat or the Q&A? These two texts, which of these have been written by an algorithm? Would you think it's it's 1, asked to clarify reports, or it's 2, many countries have permitted? And I'll give you a couple of minutes. Put it into the Q&A or into the chat. What are your answers?
Number one answer already there.
Okay. Cool. And yes, you're right. Number 1, though it looks like it comes from a newspaper, that is something that was written by an algorithm. We'll have one of these later. This particular algorithm is this one, GPT-2. These days, there's even GPT-3. I told you about students can be given simple formatted exams. You just answer questions. But a computer can do that. Sometimes they're not very good. When it comes to this one, who played John Connor in the original Terminator, clearly the machine looked at Terminator and John Connor, and the answer is this one. They missed out the original, so this is less than 50% right. However, 83.4%, 8 out of 10, quite good. Yeah. All very straightforward questions, I give you that, but this has been further developed. As you can see, this was quoted back in 2019. But in a way it makes scary reading. What's the point in doing these things when we have machines that can already do that for us? So what do we do? English language, of course, very important here. It's my specialism. If you look at learning English as a foreign language to an advanced level, there are 4 skills and abilities that are being promoted, help to develop. Of course, there's fluency. There's a lot of research that shows you're fluent in a second or third language. It helps with your fluency in your L1. Elaboration, because you have been taught to learn about another language, you're more aware of your own language. Originality, because you're being faced with a different culture and a different set of thinking by a different language. You know that. Flexibility. I mentioned that before, the idea that you don't have to have full exactness. What you have to have is an approach that is very close to what it should be, the probability that is the highest. And that gives you the flexibility to overrule what seems to be a mistake, the flexibility to understand something that makes most sense. And of course also the flexibility to think and talk in various languages. Some other points that have been made with this, this idea is technology is compromising our ability to be creative. And it's true, if everybody uses the same technology tool and the tool does loads of things by themselves, creating a piece of music or a piece of art, for example, you find that maybe in architecture where people use CAD systems and everything is so easy, go for that. And Richard Sennett, who I mentioned earlier in this book, pointed out that if you look, for example, at architects, the idea of doing things in a way that is hand drafted and not that easy gives you a feel for not just what is possible, but also what can be different, because a computer program will always come up with the same solutions to the same problem, makes it very, very easy, and you get lazy, but that's no longer creative. Putting these two things together, having technology and what we are doing, will create something new. We have seen this in the past. We cannot avoid having that in the future. We have a different level of technology. Working together with that, we can be true geniuses. Okay. Arts and humanities, this idea of something that's unfocused, aimless, just a creative space. Chile, they tried that. We don't have any of these. Everything will be input-output, very, very focused kind of education, aim-orientated. Yes, but Chile has never produced great engineers. Quite the contrary, they can't even build bridges that open and close, which is what they're supposed to be doing. I don't understand. It goes back to the quote that I gave from Vasily Grossman. There is an idea that you have to have this unfocused space to step away and let creativity grow. Further. Having this, of course, can be seen as an administrator's nightmare. How can we check for learning outcomes? But losing ourselves in a world that is purely imaginary is exactly that. It is quite unfocused. But it is this particular aimlessness that gives us the space to come back and be very focused and come up with solutions, new solutions, not just regurgitating what is already there. Okay. There's one more of these. The first one was like a newspaper text. This one is something where you have something that might be different. So you have 1, 2, and 3. Is 1 or 2 or 3 something that you think is written by an algorithm rather than a human being? Answers please, not on a postcard, but in the chat or the Q&A. Give you a few seconds to read this and come up with an answer. Okay, so if you put your money on number 1 because it says AI, that was just because I was trying to fool you. If number 3 looks familiar to you, it should be because it is from George Orwell's 1984. Number 2, however, was written by GPT-2, by an algorithm. It was given the first couple of paragraphs of 1984. It realized it is some kind of science fiction, but it's a dystopian novel. And then it carried on like this. Very American, most this, of course, is Britain. So, I'll have a bit of a break because I shall hand over to Tor now on the idea of play to learn. So there are some examples like this, EasyBot, EssayBot, which is quite easy as well. Tor, over to you.
Hello, Michael. All right, so it's my time now. Hello, you. All right, thank you, everyone. I think this is now my time to share my presentation. I need to share my screen. First of all, can you all hear me? I want to see in the chat. Can you all hear my voice? Yes, loud and clear. Okay, thank you. Now, I'm just gonna be quick. All right. According to Mentor in his book in 2018, 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, he says that the future of online education is actually the one related with AI. It's called AI injected e-learning. So we cannot avoid, the use of AI in our field, which is education. So this would be the future of our education, where AI will take part, many parts in our works. Also, from Luckin and friends in 2016, they said that if students learn with artificial intelligence, there are some benefits they could gain. They said that the learning will be more personalized because every student will be treated differently, not like the one that maybe many of us are used to doing right now. We treat all children the same and will be more flexible in terms of time, in terms of materials, and inclusive. So everyone will have the right to have education. Everyone, even the one with limited facilities, and will be more engaging. Learning will be more. That's according to Lucky. Now, let's try out some. Michael has already shown one of the things that I'm going to show you. Probably some of you already know this. This one is called EssayBot. You know this, right? Let's just try it out. Can you still see my screen, right? So So in EssayBot, this is an AI-based application where people can write essays just by typing the title or the topic. For example, if I write something like this, I want to write artificial intelligence in language learning, and I push enter. Researching, I mean, if you do it by yourself, how many times will you spend on this? See, not even 1 minute. Now, wait, I think still wait. It's still processing. No suitable time. Please enter more or change keyword. Oh, okay. Now, I think my internet is slow. Now, once we put the title, the application will provide us with options of paragraphs. See, you just move the arrow button here, so we can choose which one to start with, which paragraph to start with. Let's say this one. I will choose this one. All right. My internet is not working really well. Too slow. Try to change connection. It's connected already. Well, anyway, maybe many of you already know this application, where the essay bot will help you in writing essay. We provide you with paragraph. It will write you even the citations. You can try it yourself later. I will just move to another app. Here. Let's close this essay bot. Another one, this is related to writing. Now this one is related to speaking, the Cleverbot. Cleverbot, the original bot that provide the base for other speaking bot that you can find in the market, like FEbot, like Boybot, and some others. So we could try Cleverbot here. I have a new internet connection now. You can say something. It's like you can use your, just like in Siri on Google Assistant. You can say something. For example, I will try to use my voice. Hello. Oh, sorry, this work. I'll just type that. Hi. My name is Tom. Nice to meet you. So we can conduct conversation with this application using typing or even speakers. Another thing I want to share, this one, Quick Draw from Google. You see what this Quick Draw, using this Google from part of the Google experiment, you draw something and the artificial intelligence will try to guess what you are drawing, something like this. Okay, she asked me to draw a hospital. I got 2 minutes. How to draw a hospital? All right, like this maybe.
I see line, or X, or head, or shoe, or wristwatch. Oh, I know, it's hospital.
She can get it. Traffic light. Traffic light. Something
I see line, or skyscraper, or popsicle. Oh, I know, it's traffic light.
Okay, she did good. Okay, anyway, just an sample of that. Now I would like to comment. How do we bring this kind of application to our classroom? You see, with EssayBot, well, people can cheat with that. For example, if you ask our students to write an essay, they can use EssayBot. For example, also maybe we want to write something and publish, we could use Acrobat. However, if you later able to try it, the results of the paragraph provided by Acrobat is not really that smart. We still need to improve it with very much work, because they just take something from the resource in the internet and paraphrase it and make it a new paragraph, something like that. So we need to. I never used any Acrobat in mind, because when I first tried it, well, of course I was excited at the first time, but when I look at the result, it's not really. And what about Cleverbot? How do you use it in? So we just talk with the machine, unpurposely, something like that. But I want to show you an example how I did with something like that, like Google Assistant or like Siri. I did with my son actually. Where is it? Let me show this. So I hope you can hear the sound. Oops. No, he was asking the temperature in India using English.
Due to the current humidity, it feels like it's 39. The current temperature in Jakarta is 34 degrees. Due to the current
I don't have to finish off. See, this was recorded yesterday, because he knew he was being recorded, so he was kind of shy. But before that, I mean, he was at it was actually the night before. He was asking me, this tonight was very cold. I said to him, ask Google, what's the temperature? And he asked Google, what's the temperature in Salatiga? And then he said, what about in Jakarta? What about, and he would try. And I realized at that time, it was actually we are practicing what we call in our skill here, audiolingual method. Just by changing, he was only 7 years old. By changing the location, what's the temperature in India? What's the temperature in America? That's what he said. What's the temperature in? What's the temperature? He didn't realize he was actually practicing the language. And we did it so many times. Once he said, which one is more, the stars in the sky or the sands in the beaches? I said, ask Google. And then said, how many stars in the world? How many sands in the world? And then he continues, how many trees in the world? How many cars in the world? How many? I mean, he could practice using English with the Google. Of course, they cannot develop a meaningful, long conversation, but just practicing the structure with it. I think this might be. I want to. What time is it now? I want to check my. All right. I think I'm gonna continue. I don't have to use. This is masterpiece generator. You can try later, or if you later find my slide, you can see the link there. This is where you can create poems, short story, and many other things, or even song lyrics in instant. Now, there are actually concerns regarding the use of artificial intelligence in language learning. First one is ethical issues. The one example with the essay bar. What if students use that and can claim that their actual word, or even us, even teachers use artificial intelligence and claim that that's their actual word. Unreliable learning resources. Even some examples from Acrobat, they are not really good. What if students consider, oh, this is a good example? Even some example replies from Siri or Google Assistant, it's not really that coherent, not really good example of how human can, should communicate one to another. So this could be one bad example for students. That's why I said unreliable learning resources. And another thing is teacher pedagogical approaches. Maybe some of us know the limitation of the application, but we still give the student, okay, you use this and submit it to me. Or maybe some of us, we don't know yet the implication or the pedagogical approach. Because one thing that an article I read, it was from Raylan, I think from 2007, many studies show that artificial intelligence in language learning don't actually work as expected, as not as exciting as the first one people tried it. Like for example, we first tried RJBot and we could find, oh, this is really exciting, this is really amazing. But after you try it again and again, you will. So probably the reason why many not really what promising, I mean the result of the artificial intelligence, because the limited pedagogical approach attached to the application and used by the teachers. You see, now the key here is the teacher. Only teacher is the key person in education, especially in language learning, that could put the human touch to these machines, to this digital platform. Teacher is the key person. Now, another comment. This is another one from Montebello. He proposed this model, how we could make the learning becomes more effective using artificial intelligence. He proposed this one. The learning should incorporate the social aspect. So not only with machine, we need to include other people as well. And it should also able to augment motivation, to make students more motivated to learn using this application or tools. And of course, it should be able to personalize the learning environment, the learning from the student. That's according to Montebello. So this probably the critics from Raylan earlier, because many applications, they do not consider pedagogical implication for in an application. Probably we can use, and this is the task or the responsibility of the teacher. Only teacher know this. Only teachers. Programmer, they don't know this. Only teacher. Teacher can put something into the learning with AI, and only teachers know this. I also, last year, I proposed something in an article I wrote and presented in Asian conference. I said, teachers, to be able to implement or embed or integrate AI, they need to have these skills: analytical skills, creative skills, and creative skills. Teachers should be able to analyze what the students need, what materials would I use, of course, all will be related to the learning objective. And with those analysis, teachers will be able to create the activities, to create the design of the lesson plan. And at the end, should be able to evaluate what happens in the learning processes. Teachers would bring the human touch in artificial intelligence, learning with artificial intelligence. I think that's all I have to say. We are 10 minutes before time. So I only use these 3 articles for my site, and now I think I'm going to give it back to Michael. Michael, I'm going to stop share.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sure everybody sees how they can use that. And I've seen some of the chats. Somebody said they actually do talk to their Google Assistant on a regular basis. It's very good when you do that before you go to bed, I've found. Okay, just to sum up very quickly. We cannot do nothing. It's not an option. We cannot stand still. We have important tools available, and they are not just tools for teaching. They are what we come across in our everyday life. Clearly, trying to integrate these, there are very clear limitations. Staffing levels always need to be taken into account. Students' workloads, we can come up with a wonderful AI integrated module, but if that module takes a lot more time than another module and students have other modules to do, I have colleagues who've done a wonderful module. It was an option module. Very few people signed up, and of those 50% dropped out. So, you know, you have to try and find a way that it can be integrated. However, you have to keep in mind my final point, the idea of future-proofing education. We have to develop, we have to engage and support inquisitiveness, and the focus is on problem-solving skills. As Tor pointed out, these tools are not problem solvers. Quite the contrary, they might, things might look too easy. We have to make sure that a student understands that the essay is not the end-all and be-all. This is not what it's all about. It is about the student finding their own voice. And AI tools can be assisting that. They cannot do it for them, because that way they would lose their voice, and who would want to do that? Also, of course, humanities are more than just the background music. It's an essential part of our learning, of our understanding. It creates free spaces to create things and to reconsider things, taking a step back from everyday pressures. So, clearly, this is what we've been talking about. Arts and humanities and what they can bring to teaching and learning, and all that within the framework of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So we have to create spaces so people can have their eureka moments. We have to understand that humanities is not just something that is there for itself, but can also be seen as part for something that is a very, very important industry, AI. But we have to see that we cannot go on with old modes of teaching, testing, examinations. We have to look at moving away from repetitive tasks and repeating, regurgitating things towards things like pattern recognition. Problem solving is one of the key areas where we can do that. Human-centered processes, Tor kept pointing that out, something where people can see what they can do best. Group work, empathy, application of knowledge in different areas, so something that works in one area can find an application, something completely different. All things that AI as such cannot do. You can't go on autopilot, and that is not just a flaw that you would have with things like AI. You can have autopilot with predictable examinations. You cannot rely on sources that are outdated when these days everybody should have access to quality sources one way or another. So key is the ability to learn, to relearn, to unlearn. All this, of course, as Tor pointed out, requires skillful guidance. This is where us teachers come in. Okay, Tor, if you want to come back, and we'll open the Q&A because it was difficult to have the talk and then directly answer to questions, but we can open that now.
Okay, Michael, it's Francis. I'm gonna share the polling before Q&A. We are really late here. It's almost 5 minutes to the hour, but if you don't mind, no, it's okay. If you don't mind staying a little bit longer and dealing with some questions,
yeah, sure.
I believe those who are would like to hear you respond to their questions can stay, but for those who would like to leave, they can leave. But we have some questions on the Q&A section asking about the certificate and other matters related to the material. So they would like to know, can they get access to your presentation, to the slides, both to Michael and Tor? Will that be, would you allow us to get the copy of your PowerPoint, of your presentation?
Yeah, that's no problem. I'll send it to Tor's email and
Okay.
Tor.
All right, so that answers question number one. For those of you who would like to get certificate, now is the time for you to participate in the polling, which shows that you stayed until the end of the session and not just come here for the certificate. So I'm going to share the polling now. Bapak Ibu yang membutuhkan sertifikat, data sertifikatnya akan kami ambil dari polling yang akan saya edarkan sekarang. Jadi kami masih ada kita punya 3 menit sebelum jam 3 bisa diisi agar dari data itulah sertifikat akan dikeluarkan. For those asking to change names, unfortunately we cannot do that. Sertifikatnya akan dikeluarkan secara sistem, jadi Bapak Ibu yang tadi minta namanya diperbaiki, mohon maaf tidak bisa dilayani. Alright, so Michael and Tor, while I'm sharing the poll, would you please go through the question and answer and see if there's any particular questions that you would like to respond. I'm going to share the polls now to give some time for the participants to complete the survey.
Hang on.
And you can start answering it while the poll is on.
There's one question here from, it's moving, I'll have to try and have that. Jenny Manurek, if education has been modernized by sophisticated tools of AI, where's the teacher's position amongst those tools? How do teachers place themselves in order not to be replaced by AI? I think both Tor and I made very clear. And so has indeed this work. Teachers have got probably one of the safest jobs. University teachers less so than primary school teachers, but because we are very actively interacting with the human mind, it is quite important. The guidance is still needed because I think the key thing is tell the student, A, they are never going to get an A grade if they let EasyBot or something like that write their essay. B, it will never make much sense if you just go for the defaults. Even now, every year we can find a system that is more sophisticated. It never yet seems to be fully comprehensive. We might be doing that in 5 years' time. I cannot predict that. Maybe. But the important thing is that it is not about the work. It is trying to form a young being or an older student to find a way of expressing their own voice and to understand how they can integrate all these things. It always needs a teacher.
Okay, so that answers question 1 by Ibu Feni Manorek.
There's some questions for you, Tor.
Francis, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. There are so many questions. I'm confused which one to answer. Though they are all very good questions. All right.
Some ask questions about the apps, on whether they are limiting the critical thinking and of all the apps. Some also ask some practical questions about whether those apps are free or you have to pay for the apps.
The essay bot is free in the beginning, but later you need to pay. I mean, if you need to have more access, you need to pay. One question related to essay bot, of course, this is from I think I put it somewhere. If somebody asked me about essay bot, or Ida Rosmarina, tell me how would. Yeah, essay bot is just a starter. You can use it as a tool for you, of course. I mean, but not just. But I never, to be honest, I never got help from essay bot. It's better for me to look the articles by myself in Google. To be honest, that's my experience.
I might add to that. Sometimes what I feel is with Essaybot, because it finds things on the net, it is a bit like having a conversation with a colleague if you try to find an idea of what you can write about. Essaybot can certainly give you ideas, but that's all. I mean, there was another question also, Didi Setiman, if I may just very quickly. Is there any research that shows that online learning is better than conventional or traditional learning? There's some. The trouble is, of course, it's a fastly evolving subject. Things that were rather awkward 2 years ago might work better today. So because it's such a new area, there is research, but not very much. And of course, yes, some of the things that both me and Tor have referred to, you will have the our reference list. So there is some research. Maybe that is helpful. So,
all right, thank you, Michael. To continue with that question as well, whether there is a research whether online learning is better compared to traditional one. I haven't found any, but there are many research, many studies show that learning using technology could help students learn. They don't say it's better than the traditional classroom, but they say the learning, the technology could help the learning processes, something like that. I haven't found anything that compared between online learning. Of course, now we all now have to go online, but yeah, something like that. And if I may add some question about the maybe about the personalization. So one question from I put it somewhere. I need to scroll. There are so many here. 41 questions. If a teacher had 40 students and has to teach 3 classes, each with 40 students, of course, he cannot make personal connection to each of the students. Of course, it's very hard. And that's why Montebello said that AI could help this, could help personalize not the teacher and the student, but personalize the learning experience. Not make personal connection, because of course human cannot do that. We human, we cannot do that. But with the help of AI, we can personalize, not have personal connection, but to make the learning specific to each student. Something like that. Michael, you add something.
Yeah, no, I think it's the idea of personalization. It is very much about, it is an assistant. And there was a gentleman just now, or not that long ago in the Q&A, saying, I'm using, here we go, Ignatius Preduranto. In my campus, I teach about AI and ML for accounting, for the accounting field. In my opinion, they are our future, but I think the most important thing is to develop the human mind so we can control these technologies. Is my opinion right? Would I ever say that you're wrong? That's my first thing. I don't think controlling the technologies would be the correct way of saying that. After all, it's humans who develop these. A lot of approaches seem to have that, and we have seen that in the third industrial revolution. Everybody was checked out and there was a robot that was pre-programmed and they would do the job. That's not the answer. We have to see this as a collaboration. There's very little evidence that technological constructs can be seen as sentient, that they have their own thinking. If that would come to pass, that might be dystopian, because then the robots really would take over. Who knows? But that's not really the case, and they're not built to do anything like that. They're assistants, and they should be seen as assistants. We cannot close our eyes to the fact that they are there, so we have to tell our students that this will be something that they will have to learn and understand. And we cannot, you know, maybe in the 1950s that was fine. You would teach students the calculus, and that is what they needed all their lives. But was that really true? Pocket calculators, calculating machines would have come as part of their working lives. So the same is true now. will have to teach, quite importantly, not just things that are up to date now. We have to teach a feeling and understanding that people have an openness to adapt and adopt new technologies, because neither I nor anybody else will know even what is around the corner in 5 to 10 years when these people enter the job market. I hope that is a good answer. And yes, of course, your opinion.
I like the term adapt and adopt. I like those terms. Adapt and adopt, yeah?
Yeah.
Because to be honest, if you ask me about whether there are some questions about it, whether AI will replace teachers in the future, well, if I need to have an open-minded, maybe that's possible, but maybe 1,000 years from now, but not yet in the near future. Like in the other technology will come, will be more developed, old jobs will go, new jobs will come.
Yeah.
Probably teachers will not be replaced. From my readings, teachers are still important. Probably like what they are doing right now, teachers will not take much part during teaching in the classroom. But
I think what we have seen right now with COVID-19, where suddenly there was no classroom teaching.
yes.
And it was an experiment, really. And it showed that you can't achieve much by just giving people worksheets, etc. It has to be in a far more sophisticated manner. And you can't do without teachers, nor do parents want to do work without us. Francis, does it say, it says the polling is done. Do we have poll numbers?
Not yet. We still have 70 people, no, 60 people. So let's just wait. Now we have 440 out of 500 participants. So let's just wait while you answer questions. We do have people in the chat asking whether you're going to answer their questions or not. But I understand that there are so many questions in the Q&A and we are limited by time. But I think this one question, can you get to the question by Siegfrieda? The question is related to the use of essay bot to make the students hard to find their own identity. What do you think about that? As they're going to rely on AI to help them on working on their assignments, it is not their own original authentic work. Is it still their own, or they will show their style and identity? And how are we going to be responsible for this as educators?
That's what I said earlier. It is the teacher. If you just ask your students to, write an essay about this, of course they will go to essay, but there are so many now. Even now with Michael mentioned about the GPT-2, they have the new technology, it's called GPT-3. They claim it's much better instead of writing, AI doing writing. And now there's also, if you go also to Open AI Writer from OpenAI technology, you can just put the topic and in seconds they will send you an email with the article. I just tried it last night. And I mean, if you just, so it all depends to the teacher to bring, what I said, to bring the human part in this AI era. If you just ask the students, go write an article about this, they will go to Google, they go to OpenAI, they go to GPT, go to EssayBot. But what if you chunk the activities? You ask them to do discussion first, talk with their friends, make outline of their writing before, and make the first paragraph an introduction. What if you do that? I mean, this will help them also learn how to make a good writing, not relying on technology. Something like that. Maybe Michael would like to add something else.
I don't think I can add anything to that. It's the important thing is, and I'm just going through the chat now because it was difficult to try and talk and do the slides and look at the chat. And there is this idea of, yes, students can be lazy. And yeah, we do know students. Some of them can be very lazy. And some of them might just decide that what we are teaching is not the most important thing. There are other things. And, that's a discussion. But the point is that if you leave it to a machine, you probably end up all your life leaving things to a machine, and you might end up not achieving very much. It is, at the end of the day, handing in an essay, that's not the achievement. The achievement is to have created something.
Yes.
You have to, and this is part of forming your personality and show you skills. And it's a problem-solving skill. It's not about the end point, it's about how you get there. And just imagine a teacher would then go back, go over an essay and say, how did you develop these ideas? If it was done by a machine, you have no answer. And what would I do? Would I give you a fail for that? That's not the answer. I don't know whether everybody's got, who's still online, has got the answers to my two little questions. The first one was 1 and 2, and the answer would have been 1. And then it was 1, 2, and 3. And I believe it was the second one that was there written by a machine. But I will add that when I'll give Tor the slides, so you have the answers, so if you want to use that again. Okay, anything else?
Okay, let me try to find among the 59 questions still here. But I told the head of the department that we're going to stay 15 minutes longer than the schedule, but we still have 31 people still struggling to find the polls. If you're accessing it from your phone, try to check on the near the Q&A or in the more. It should be available there. Try to play around with your Zoom panel, and you will be able to see it. And for those, it might be on the top side or on the bottom side of your Zoom panel. We also have questions about the next webinar. As Ibu Anita mentioned at the beginning, we have a series of webinar in this 2020, and the next one will be this Thursday. And we're going to share you the QR code and also the link for you to register. If you can just scan that, and we will make sure that you also get the link of the registration in your email later on. So we still have a lot of questions. I'm going to give a chance for one participant if you would like to ask your questions directly to Michael and Toar. Who do you want to have, Toar?
I mean, so there's so many people who ask, do you mean
raised hands? So if you raise your hands, we will be able to let you ask the questions directly to them, to the speakers. Can you see the participants?
Yeah,
Michael?
there's so many of them raising hands.
Only 10.
Oh, 10, but 10 is many.
Yeah, we just pick one while we wait for the survey to poll. Which one?
Up to you.
Up to me. Okay, I'm just gonna choose. I don't know if they have questions or not. I think I'm just gonna go with I don't know. This is really names. Maybe I'll go with Andi Tenrisana Syam, because I'm from South Sulawesi, so I like to give my fellow. Hello, Ibu.
I didn't know it's Ibu.
Atau Bapak Andi Tenrisana Syam. You can now talk if you would like to ask questions to Michael or Toar.
All right.
Hey, Andy.
Nggak tahu.
Bapak. Oh. Okay. So he's not ready to talk, or it's just an accident. Okay, so let's just go one more and then that's it. We will go with, I think, Muhammad Arfinda.
All right.
Pak Muhammad, apakah ada yang ingin ditanyakan langsung? So Michael, we're giving a chance for the participants who raise their hands if they would like to ask question directly, but it seems that probably they just raised their hands by accident.
Okay.
Oh, hello, hello.
Hello. Okay, I have a question.
Okay, excellent. Where are you from?
I'm from Yogyakarta.
Okay, so neighbors to Salatiga,
Yes.
yeah?
Okay. My question
okay, please
is...
ask your question.
Okay, thank you. My question is, what do you think about AI that's replacing human works so that there are few opportunities to get jobs and unemployment is going up? Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Pak Muhammad. Michael?
Yes. Don't do insurance underwriting, mathematical technician, data entry. All these things are jobs that are most likely to go. There's other jobs that nobody cares about anymore. The name Cooper is still there as somebody's surname. You don't have people who make barrels anymore. This might be seen as a very positivist view, and people say that maybe this fourth industrial revolution is a lot worse. We cannot predict the future though. It might happen. There are definitely jobs that will go, and I think this is why we try to impress that on you. We have to tell students to be prepared to be flexible, to be prepared to learn and relearn, to unlearn, and to be open to something completely new that we cannot teach now because it might happen in 5-10 years. It's not too different to what has happened in the past though. There might be different technologies, but I think the whole way of how that has come about, that's not different. You know, can you really assume that people will not go to a bar or a restaurant and therefore the barista or the waiter is no longer serving you? Even 4 months ago, I would have said, no, that's not a job that can just go. Now we are under lockdown, all these places have closed. But I suppose over the years, that will be fine. We can go back. We don't even have to worry too much about social distancing. The same thing will happen in the future. There are certain things where you would say it's so much based on human contact that will not go. There are other jobs, more white-collar jobs, and you can say, yes, AI can predict or can look at data and can come up with a diagnosis that is as good as a doctor. No doctor that uses that says, that would make me unemployed. It just helps me. Because humans can go wrong with their diagnosis. If you have a system that is far more exact, obviously you would want to use that. Doctors will then understand that they have to use AI as one of the tools to do their diagnosis. I don't think as a human being you feel ill and you just trust a robot to do everything for you. You want a human being. That's just part of our nature. I hope that is an answer to you, Mohammed.
Okay. All right. We are way behind over the time actually, but ladies and gentlemen, we have 489 people submitted the poll, so I'm going to end 100%, Michael. So I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm going to share it with all of you. But before we end this session, I would like to thank Michael and Thor for sharing with us this afternoon. Particularly, it feels like I'm in your class, like attending a 2-hour lecture on artificial intelligence. And I noticed that some of my students are also joining this session, so it will be great for them to experience this experience. So thank you, Michael, for doing this from Finland. And I hope you will come back again. This is the second time Michael helped us with our seminar, and both times it's online. So I told Michael that next time we invite him, he should be in Salatiga.
Next time it'll be in person rather than
face to face, rather than virtual. Okay, so thank you very much. If you appreciate this, you can say thank you in the chat room or clap, clap, clap. And the certificate will be emailed to you by the system. So if you submitted the post, then you will get the certificate. And I'm sorry we cannot accommodate if you have mistyped your name and so on. That's just beyond the system. Thank you very much. And we will hope to see you on Thursday, where we have our second webinar. And this webinar will go on until December. The next webinar will be on Thursday in the afternoon, Jakarta time or Western Indonesian time at 4 p.m. with Dr. Drew Whitworth and Neni Isharianti on the employable teacher personality identities, concepts, and practices.